deployed.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Counsel?
Agent Peterson, earlier this morning you testified about your career in the Force Investigations Unit, correct?
Yes.
You've evaluated over 70 claimed reports of excessive force, correct?
Yes.
Including several homicides.
Judge, I object to this. I never went into past experience. It's outside the scope of cross-examination.
I'm getting to a point, Your Honor.
Okay. You may continue for a while.
In your experience, has reviewing body-worn camera footage been a critical aspect of your investigation?
Yes.
And indeed, requesting body-worn camera is a critical request that is made in an investigation.
Same objection, Mayor. I didn't go into requesting body-worn cameras at all.
The objection is sustained beyond the scope.
What would occur if there was no body-worn camera to review in an officer-involved case? If you had no body-worn camera footage?
Object to that is not relevant, Your Honor, and it's also outside the scope.
I am again sustaining the objection outside the scope.
Does body-worn camera footage have certain benefits?
Same objection, Your Honor.
The objection is overruled.
When body-worn camera video exists, are there certain benefits to reviewing that video versus relying on the testimony of witnesses?
I didn't ask that question. It's outside the scope. I talked about visual observation.
Okay, one word objections, please. I'll let you answer that.
Gonna have to repeat it, I'm sorry.
Sure. Does reviewing body-worn camera footage in these cases have advantages at times than simply relying on the testimony or statements of witnesses?
At times, yes.
Yes. No further questions.
Special Agent Peterson, what I asked you was, is a visual observation of something, forget about the testimony, a visual observation of something better than a body-worn camera that has tunnel vision?
It can be, yes. It'll be different.
It's a large, you can see it better if you're there looking at it than a body-worn camera. Isn't that true? Because you see more?
Yeah, that would be accurate. Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Morrison?
What advantages does reviewing body-worn camera have in your investigation?
Object, Your Honor, outside the scope of recall.
The objection is overruled.
What is the advantage of body-worn camera? It provides a independent depiction of an event.
That can be reviewed,
That can be reviewed.
paused,
Yep, yes,
brought into court as an exhibit?
yes.
No further questions.
Anything further, Mr. Chairman? Anything further?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. You may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
The state may call its next witness.
This time, Your Honor, the state calls Michelle Frasconi.
Okay. Good afternoon. Will you please stand behind the witness chair?
What is up, everyone? Please take a second to hit that like button. The more likes that we get in a short period of time, the more people the algorithm will bring into the chat to come hang out with us and see what's going on. So please hit that like button and let me know how your lunch was.
Please remove your mask. State your full name and spell it.
First name is Michelle, last name is Frasconi, M-I-C-H-E-L-L-E, last name Frascone.
Okay, we have a court reporter taking down everything that's being said. So you have to say yes or no instead of shaking your head. Don't say uh-huh or uh-uh. Only one person can talk at a time. Wait until the question is finished before you answer. If you don't understand a question, ask for clarification. And finally, if an objection is made, stop talking. Don't answer it unless I tell you to.
Thank you.
Counsel?
Would you state your occupation for the record?
I'm a police officer for the state of Minnesota.
What's your current, what law enforcement agency are you with?
I work for the state of Minnesota, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension.
What is your current rank?
Assistant Special Agent in Charge.
How long have you been with the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension?
I have been with them since 2016.
What unit are you currently assigned to?
Currently assigned to the Force Investigative Unit.
Prior to working for the BCA, do I understand that you have prior law enforcement experience?
That's correct.
And what is that?
Prior to coming to the BCA, worked for the city of Woodbury as a police officer.
And that was from 2006 to 2016, correct?
That's correct.
And you're a licensed peace officer still today?
Yes, I am.
And you take continuing education courses to maintain that license?
Yes.
Based on your law enforcement experience, did you acquire specialized knowledge or experience in the use of firearms and other weapons such as tasers?
I did.
If asked, are you able to describe the basic features and functionality of weapons such as firearms and tasers?
I am.
As part of your work in the Force Investigations Unit, do I understand that you've responded or participated in the investigation of over 100 officer-involved shootings,
That's correct.
both as a lead agent and at times a supporting agent?
Correct.
And you were assigned to assist in the investigation of the case involving Kim Potter, correct?
That's correct.
I want to get right to your actions on April 11th of 2001. Do you recall that day?
I do.
And what were you doing?
It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was at home.
Okay. And did you receive a report of an officer-involved shooting in Brooklyn Center which prompted a response from you?
Yes, I did.
And could you describe that response?
I was contacted by my supervisor who requested that I respond to the Brooklyn Center Police Department.
And when did you arrive to the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
I think I arrived around 4 p.m.
When you arrived, were you the first agent at the precinct, or was anyone else from the BCA already present?
Prior to my arrival, Special Agent in Charge Scott Mueller was at the police department.
And what did you do when you first arrived?
When I first arrived, I met with Agent Mueller, who provided me just some general information about what the investigation was involving.
Soon after you met with Agent Mueller, were you joined by another BCA agent?
Yes, I was.
And who was that?
Agent Sam McGinnis.
At the time after you were briefed by Mueller and spoke to Agent McGinnis, did you learn who the involved officer or officers were?
Yes, I did.
And who was that?
Officer Kim Potter was the involved officer, and then there were 2 witness officers that were also at the agency.
Was that Officer Lucky and Sergeant Johnson?
That's correct.
Okay. Involved officer or officers. After meeting with
Yes.
Agent Mueller and Agent McGinnis, what was the next? Who was the next individual who you encountered?
I went into the conference room that Officer Potter was in with her counsel, and then at the point after that, I went upstairs and met with Sergeant Johnson.
Okay, well, let's talk about both of those encounters. You said you went upstairs to see Johnson, so do I understand there's a conference room on a lower level or a main level of the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
That's correct.
Okay, and that's where you saw Officer Potter?
Correct.
Was Agent McGinnis with you as well?
Yes, he was.
When you observed Officer Potter, was she still wearing her uniform?
Yes, she was.
How much time did you spend with her?
A very short amount of time.
Okay. Before that date, did you know her?
I did.
In what capacity?
In a professional capacity, and our husbands had prior worked together many years ago.
Okay. Would you agree that Ms. Potter is sitting here at council table over at the front council table closest to you?
Yes.
Okay. At the time you encountered her, did you observe whether she had a firearm on her duty belt?
Yes, I did.
Did you receive any information about that firearm?
I was advised that that firearm was Sergeant Johnson's firearm.
Okay. What was the first action that you and Agent McGinnis took when you encountered her?
Photographs were taken of her uniform.
And what happened to the equipment that she was wearing?
It was collected.
Okay. At that time, did you know why she was in possession of Sergeant Johnson's firearm?
I did not.
After the firearm was collected, do you recall what was done with it?
It was placed inside of a box.
Okay. Did you observe at that time whether it was loaded or unloaded?
I did.
And what was it?
It was unloaded.
Unloaded? So you took Sergeant Johnson's gun from Officer Potter. What did you do after that?
I went upstairs and met with Sergeant Johnson.
At some point, did you also speak again with Agent Mueller?
I did.
Did you reveal that you had a prior interaction with Officer Potter?
I did.
And did that affect your involvement in this investigation?
Not a lot. I just asked for, to have other duties assigned to me, and at that time I was assigned to Sergeant Johnson.
Okay. And why did you ask to not have duties related to Officer Potter?
Just out of just making sure that there was no conflict or any issues as a result of it.
Sometimes we use the words appearance of impropriety. You wanted to avoid something like that. Am I correct?
Yeah, I'm going to let you answer that. Objection overruled.
So you said you were tasked with then going to talk to Sergeant Johnson?
That's correct.
And did you bring anything with you when you met with him?
I did.
And what was that?
I brought his handgun upstairs.
Okay. And when you brought his handgun upstairs, what did you anticipate doing?
I wasn't sure of his involvement at the time, so I wanted to make sure that it was with me. Many times we find that supervisors will exchange weapons when they weren't actually have any involvement in the case, and so when I went upstairs to meet with him, there was a possibility that his weapon would be returned. However, I became aware that he was a first-person witness, and so at that time I held on to his handgun and then collected Officer Potter's handgun.
Where did you discover Officer Potter's handgun?
In his holster.
Okay. So you made a plan to collect both firearms at that point?
That's correct.
Okay. I now want to discuss your interactions with Sergeant Johnson. How much time did you spend with him?
I guess I would approximate 10 minutes or so.
Okay. Did you take any photographs of him?
I did.
At the time, was he wearing Officer Potter's firearm?
Yes, he was.
Did you inspect that firearm to see whether it was loaded or unloaded?
I did.
And was it
It was loaded.
loaded? And what did you do with that firearm after you collected it?
I secured it in a box for our crime scene.
When you collected both firearms, did you document them by serial number to ensure that they were distinguished?
I did.
Okay. And to whom did you bring those firearms after you documented them?
Agent McGinnis.
Agent McGinnis. I now want to show you just a few photographs. Could you please put up Exhibit 176? I'm showing you Exhibit 176. If I says, can you recognize which gun this is?
Yes.
Which gun is this?
Officer Potter's.
Take a look again. It's the unloaded
Oh,
firearm.
I apologize. Sergeant Johnson's.
Thank you. You said you took several photographs of Officer Johnson. If I showed you two photos of them, would you recognize them?
Yes.
At this time, the state offers Exhibits 84 and 85, photographs of Sergeant Johnson. 84 and 85, sir?
Any objection? Exhibits 84 and 85 will be admitted and you may publish.
Please show 84. Agent Frasconi, I'm showing you Exhibit 84. Is this the picture of Sergeant Michael Johnson as you saw him on April 11th?
Yes.
Now Exhibit 85. Could you describe what's shown here in Exhibit 85?
That would be Officer Potter's handgun showing that it was loaded and contained within Sergeant Johnson's holster.
Okay. I'd now like to show Exhibit 178, which is already admitted into evidence. Do you recognize which gun this is?
I do.
Which gun is this?
This is Officer Potter's handgun.
Okay. And does it also include the ammo that you discovered in the firearm?
Correct.
Okay. And then Exhibit 179. Again, just a close-up of that serial number, correct?
That's correct.
And then Exhibit 180. Again, the loaded magazine that you discovered.
Correct.
Okay. And then again, Agent Frasconi, I'll show you the exhibit. I'll speak into the mic in a second. Exhibit 199, would you agree this is Officer Potter's firearm?
Correct.
And that was Exhibit 199. No further questions, Your Honor.
Is there any cross?
No cross.
All right. Step down.
Thank you.
The state may call its next witness.
At this time, the state calls Agent Sam McGinnis.
Good afternoon. Okay, please stand behind the witness chair and raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully testify in connection with this cause?
I do, Your Honor.
Please have a seat. Remove your mask, please. And state your full name and spell it.
Sam McGinnis, SAMMCGINNIS.
All right, the court reporter is taking down everything that's being said. So say yes or no instead of shaking your head. Don't say uh-huh or uh-uh. If you don't understand a question, let the lawyer know. If an objection is made, stop talking. And don't answer the question unless I tell you to. Okay, only one person can talk at a time, so wait till the question's finished before you answer.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
Could you please state your occupation for the record?
I'm a senior special agent with the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, currently in the Force Investigations Unit,
How long have you been employed by the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension?
since April of 2020.
Do you have law enforcement experience prior to joining the BCA?
I do.
Could you please recount that for the jury?
I was with the Waseca Police Department from 2011 to 2015. From 2015 to 2020, I was with the Mankato Department of Public Safety.
Could you describe your assignments when you worked for the Mankato Police Department?
I started there as a patrol officer. I worked my way through investigations, working narcotics, and I left there as a patrol sergeant.
Did you have any specialized experience with firearms?
I did. One of my collateral duties was a firearms instructor.
And that required an additional certification, correct?
I did.
And you're still a licensed peace officer and take continuing education courses to maintain that license?
Correct.
Would you agree that you have acquired specialized training and experience in both firearms and tasers?
The basic functions, yes.
Yep. And if asked, you are able to describe the basic features and functionality of both firearms and tasers, correct?
Yes.
Now, the jury has already heard testimony about what the Force Investigations Unit does, but I want to specifically focus on what you did on April 11th. Okay, sir?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall that day?
I do.
And did you receive some information that prompted a response from you?
I did.
And what was that information?
I was contacted by ASAC Mike Phil concerning a fatal officer-involved shooting that occurred in Brooklyn Center. He informed me that the driver was deceased. There was one officer that had discharged their firearm, and two officers that had been on scene during the incident.
And was there a request for you to respond somewhere?
Yes.
Where did you go?
ASAC field request that I respond directly to the Brooklyn Center Police Department.
When did you arrive?
Approximately a little after 1,600 hours.
Okay. We know that is 4 p.m.
Correct.
When you arrived, were you the first agent there?
I was not.
Who else was present?
Special Agent in Charge Scott Mueller and Assistant Special Agent in Charge Michelle Frasconi were already on scene.
Did you have a conversation with them prior to beginning your investigation?
I did.
And were you given an initial task?
I was.
What was that task?
I was tasked with photographing and collecting the equipment from Officer Kim Potter.
And did you meet with Officer Potter at the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
I did.
And she's seated here at council table?
Yes, sir.
At the time that you encountered her, was she still wearing her uniform?
She was.
Was she in possession of her duty belt?
She was.
Was she in possession of a firearm?
She was.
Did you receive any information about that firearm?
After our interaction together, I did, yes.
Yep. And you learned that that was Sergeant Johnson's firearm, correct?
I did.
Was that a loaded or unloaded firearm?
Unloaded.
Did you ultimately take photographs of her?
I did.
Did those photographs include her wearing the duty belt, firearm, and taser that she had on her person?
Yes.
After taking those photographs, do you recall what you did? Next.
I do.
What was that?
I collected her equipment to include her duty belt.
Okay. Did you collect that firearm?
I did.
And where did that go?
That went into a box and then into ASAC Frasconi's custody.
And when you collected it, did you confirm that it was unloaded?
Yes.
Okay. After the firearm was removed, you testified that you did collect that duty belt.
Yes.
And could you describe what is all contained in a typical officer's duty belt?
Typically, a firearm, a set of keys, spare magazines for said firearm, flashlight, mace, handcuffs, radio, taser, a baton.
Is the placement of items on an officer's duty belt something that a typical officer plans out and does deliberately?
Yes.
When you collected the duty belt, did you separate the taser from the duty belt, or did it remain in its holster?
It remained in its holster.
How much time did you spend with Officer Potter?
Altogether, maybe 2 hours.
2 hours. Do I understand that you, at one point, went to North Memorial Hospital where she provided a blood sample?
Yes.
And then you returned back to the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
Myself, Officer Potter left from the hospital and didn't return.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying. When you returned to the Brooklyn Center Police Department, did you have another encounter with Agent Frasconi?
I did.
And did she provide you any evidence at that point?
She did.
What did she provide you?
2 firearms.
And at that point, did she describe to you which firearm was Potter's and which firearm was Sergeant Johnson's?
Yes.
And did you document that in a chain of custody form that's used by the BCA?
Yes.
After you collected the firearms from Agent Frasconi, can you tell the jury where you brought those firearms?
I brought those 2 firearms along with the blood sample or blood kit to the crime scene team leader, Melissa Lauren, and signed them over to her custody.
Okay. At this time, I want to show the jury the photographs that you took of the defendant. The state offers at this time exhibits 210 to 213.
Exhibits 210 to 213 will be admitted into evidence, and you may publish.
First, I'm showing you Exhibit 210. Do you recognize this?
I do.
What is this?
It's a picture that I took of Officer Potter.
And this is her standing, looking straight toward you, right?
Correct.
face forward. Okay. And can you see the taser in her holster?
Yes,
And what side of her body does she have that holster?
her left side.
Okay. Published 211, pardon me, 211. And what, this is another photograph of Officer Potter, correct?
Yes,
And to which direction is she standing in 211?
she's showing me her right side.
Okay. And this is the side that she held her firearm?
Correct.
Okay. 212? I'm showing you Exhibit 212. What's shown here?
Her left side.
Okay. And this is, again, as you testified, the side where she's wearing her taser?
Correct.
Okay. And then 213. For completeness, this is what Officer Potter looked like from behind, correct?
Correct.
Right. Now, do you know whether, you can take that down, do you know whether the duty belt and taser that you collected from the defendant were photographed?
They were.
And you've seen a set of photographs prior to trial, correct?
I have.
State offers Exhibits 214 to 225, Your Honor. These are photographs of the duty belt and taser.
Any objection? Those exhibits will be admitted into evidence and you may publish.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please show 214. We'll try to do these in a series, Agent McGinnis, and I'll ask you what is shown, and if you could please just fulsomely describe what you see, I think we can go pretty efficiently. I'm showing you Exhibit 214. What is shown here?
Officer Potter's duty belt laying flat on a table.
Exhibit 215. What's shown here?
Her taser out of the holster.
216. What is shown here?
Officer Potter's empty firearm holster.
Okay. And right next to the firearm holster, these are some of the items which you described an officer typically carries on a duty belt?
Yes, sir.
Exhibit 217. Would you agree that 217 is another more close-up image of the firearm holster?
Yes, sir.
Exhibit 218. Just a more close-up image of the firearm holster, correct?
Yes, sir.
Exhibit 219. Just another image of how the firearm holster is mounted on the duty belt. Is that correct, sir?
Correct.
Exhibit 220. What does Exhibit 220 show you?
Officer Potter's empty taser holster.
Exhibit 221. Another photo of the taser holster, correct?
Correct.
Exhibit 222. Another photo of the taser holster, correct?
Correct.
Exhibit 223. Would you agree this is a side view of the taser holster?
Yes.
Could you describe what the black piece of plastic on that taser holster is?
The one that looks like a lever, if you will.
Okay, a lever.
It's a security mechanism. It once the taser is inside of the holster, it's retained there by that security mechanism and can't be brought out again until that is pushed and the taser is released.
And then Exhibit 224. This is just a straight image of the taser, is that correct? Exhibit 224?
Yes, sir.
And then 225? What is shown here?
Just the bottom of Officer Potter's taser showing the serial number and the department number on it.
Thank you. Put that down. Based on your examination of the defendant and the defendant's equipment, could you testify about how she had her weapons holstered to enable her to draw them?
They were both what I would call a straight draw position. So both the rear handles of the taser and the gun would be facing her rear.
How was the firearm, pardon me, how would Officer Potter be able to pull the firearm from her firearm holster?
Her firearm was on her dominant side, which you have to use your right hand to draw.
Yep. Was there any safety mechanisms or straps that were holding it into the holster?
Yes.
What was that? Could you describe that?
That particular holster has a snap retention system, same concept. It's a security mechanism. Once the firearm is in the holster and that snap is, placed on, the firearm cannot be removed until that snap is released.
Okay. And you would unsnap that snap with your dominant hand, with your right hand?
Yes.
Okay. What about the taser on the left side? How is that unholstered?
Again, breaking that retention system or pushing that lever, and then using your non-dominant hand.
Am I correct that the defendant's duty belt and taser were stored at the BCA during the pendency of this case?
Yes.
When the BCA stored these items, were they altered or manipulated in any way?
No.
Do you agree that the belt was transported here to the Hennepin County Government Center in preparation for trial?
Yes.
And did you see that belt and its contents again while here at the Government Center?
I did.
And when you did you take some action to alter that duty belt prior to trial?
Yes.
And what was that?
The holster, the firearm holster and the taser holster were both removed from the duty belt
And why was that done?
to be shown in court.
If I showed you these actual items we've been discussing, would you recognize them?
Yes.
Okay. Let's start with the duty belt. The state offers Exhibit 378.
378 will be admitted into evidence, and you may show the agent badge exhibit.
Agent McGinnis, I'm showing you Exhibit 378. You recognize this item.
Yes.
And what is this?
Officer Potter's duty belt.
Would you agree it's the duty belt, but without the two holsters?
I would.
State offers at this time Exhibit 379, the firearm holster.
Any objection? 379 will be admitted, and you may approach the witness.
Let's try something. Agent McGinnis, I'm showing you on the view screen here Exhibit 379, correct?
Yes, sir.
And would you agree this is the firearm holster?
I would.
All right. I'm going to stop this. You testified earlier about a snap. Is this the snap that you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so when you're holding it on the right side like this is the snap that must be depressed to take the whole, firearm off?
To release the firearm, yes.
Permission.
Counsel, you need to stay behind the podium.
That's fine. Your Honor.
Okay.
Next, the state offers Exhibit 380, the taser holster.
Oh, that exhibit will be admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Agent McGinnis, you recognize this as the taser holster, Exhibit 380?
Yes.
And the clasp or the lever that you talked about is still functioning today?
Yes.
Now I want to show you the actual taser. State offers Exhibit 203.
Any objection? 203 will be admitted.
Permission to approach and to hand the exhibit to the witness for demonstration.
Name?
I have a question first. Agent McGinnis, you now are in possession of Exhibit 203. Could you describe this taser's general features?
It's a Taser 7, model Taser 7, yellow in color. It has a safety switch on it, a battery in the bottom of it.
Could you hold up the taser and show the jury the safety switch? If you have that safety switch in the disarmed position, can that be fired?
No.
To activate it, you have to flip the safety switch, am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. And one moment ago, deputy came over and provided you a live battery, correct?
Correct.
All right. What will happen when you turn on that battery, based on your training experience?
When I put the battery in and activate the taser,
Yeah.
it will show the, it'll arm it and show the lasers, the CID screen, and the flashlight.
Okay. When you say it'll show the CID screen, could you describe where that's going to come from?
From the back, it shows the information about the taser, the battery level, and the probe status.
Okay, and you testified that there's also lasers?
Yes.
Okay, could you tell the jury what is shot out the end of that taser once you arm it?
There are aiming lasers that I guess show you where to fire. The taser probes.
Okay. At this time, Agent McGinnis, I'd ask you to stand up, stay behind the witness box there, and to activate the taser to show the LED lights, the lasers, and the flashlight.
Oh dang, somebody's getting tased. He don't know how to operate it. He said lasers like it was totally ridiculous. He's like, it has lasers?
Thank you. Agent McGinnis, without pointing the taser at Judge Chu, could you please show the back end of that taser to the jury? Thank you. You can please disarm that taser, and could you remove that battery so it could be collected by the deputy? All right, I want to get back to some investigative work you did in this case. Did you ever visit the crime scene?
Briefly.
Okay. Just to bring the firearms to Melissa Warren?
Yes.
In addition to the evidence that you obtained from Officer Potter, did you collect other evidence?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of what you gathered, would you agree you gathered a lot of the documentation in this case?
Yes.
That include paperwork, records, policies, etc.?
Correct.
Did you also participate in a number of witness interviews?
Yes.
And you collected reports from various officers?
Yes.
I want to talk, not about those per se, but your events on May 4th. Do you recall meeting with witnesses at the Brooklyn Center Police Department on May 4th?
Yes.
Okay, who were those witnesses?
Commander Garrett Flesland and Sergeant Mike Peterson.
Was that a scheduled meeting?
It was.
What was the purpose of the meeting?
To upload Officer Potter's data from her taser.
And to do that, did you have to then bring Officer Potter's taser, the one you just held in your hand, back to the police department?
Yes.
And what sort of data did you hope to obtain from that?
The records of use, a full audit of the taser, make sure it's functioning properly, things of that nature.
Okay. And did you receive insistence in getting that information off of the taser?
I did.
And how was that performed?
Sergeant Mike Peterson removed the battery from the taser and put it in the docking station at the Brooklyn Center Police Department, and then uploaded the data onto their computer system.
And then you end up getting a report from that, correct?
Sergeant Peterson printed out a copy of the audit for me, yes.
And then he provided it to you.
Correct.
Okay. What did you learn regarding who had possessed that taser prior to coming into possession of it yourself?
I learned that Officer Potter was the only one that had possession of that taser, at least in the field.
Okay. And when did she gain possession of it?
March 26th, I believe.
Did you receive any other information about the taser's functionality?
Yes,
And whether it was functioning at that time?
it was.
Okay. Now, was there any data that you received regarding when the taser had been function tested?
Yes.
What is a function test?
It's a test you perform on the taser to make sure the core electronics are working properly. So an internal and external check.
Are you familiar with how often an officer is supposed to perform a function test?
Yes.
How often?
According to the Brooklyn Center Police Department taser policy, they should perform a spark test before each shift.
If an officer has a taser on their duty belt, how would the officer have to remove that taser to perform the function test?
Yes.
Now, have you heard of a function test also being called a spark test?
Yes.
Why is it called a spark test?
The spark test name comes from when you arc the taser to make sure that it's working properly.
So part of the function test is actually not only turning it on, but causing an electrical current to be shot through it,
Correct.
or sparked. In the information that you received in the report, did the report indicate when and whether a function test was performed on particular days?
Yes.
All right. Slightly related topic. In addition to the taser data, did you gather information about when Officer Potter worked since March 26th?
Yes.
And how did you receive that information?
Commander Flesland emailed me a copy, the days she had worked.
Okay. And do you recall how many shifts Officer Potter worked between March 26th and April 11th?
Yes.
How many?
10.
If I showed you that email again, would you recognize it?
Yes.
State Offers Exhibit 226.
226 will be admitted and you may publish.
There we go. Agent McGinnis, let's zoom in here. I'm showing you Exhibit 226. Would you agree this is a copy of Commander Flesland's email to you?
Yes.
And right here, we've zoomed in on the pertinent portion of the email. This would recount Officer Potter's work history from March 26th to April 11th, correct?
Correct.
And essentially, she worked March 26th, 7th, and 8th, March 31st and April 1st, April 5th and 6th, and then April 9th, 10th, and 11th, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You can take that down. Once you had that work schedule, what did you do with that information?
I cross-referenced it to the taser audit showing when function tests or spark tests were conducted and when they weren't.
Did you draw any conclusions?
I did.
What were those conclusions?
Officer Potter had conducted function test or a spark test on her taser 6 out of the 10 shifts.
But not all 10.
No.
Do you recall the last occasion when she performed the function test?
April the 9th.
April 9th? So she worked on April 10th and 11th and did not perform the function test on either day.
Correct.
All right. Excuse me, one word objections, please. It has been asked and answered. Please move on.
Thank you.
And no more speaking objections. All right? Okay.
I do want to talk more about these function tests. And I don't want to repeat your testimony. But you did conclude that there were days on which the function test was not performed, correct?
Correct.
Now, Agent McGinnis, you were a police officer for 10 years. In terms of your investigation, was this information that you learned about her failure to function test noteworthy?
It was.
The objection is sustained.
Was there failure to
The
function
witness
test
looks
based on
like
your
the
understanding of
attorneys
purpose
are
of
getting
the
scolded by
policy
mom.
violation of that policy?
I think you need more foundation for that, counsel. I'm going to sustain the objection for lack of foundation.
You previously testified that you understood, Agent McGinnis, that the function test was something that needed to be performed every day before officer shift, correct? You testified to that?
Yes.
Okay. And then you also testified about information about when that was not done by Officer Potter, correct? I'm
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
Yes.
just doing the math here. Based on that information in your investigation, did you conclude that she violated that policy?
I'm going to sustain the objection for lack of foundation.
Okay. Did the, let's say this, your results, pardon me, your conclusions that she did not function test, those are, you found no information to the contrary, correct?
Correct.
Now, earlier we discussed the collection of the firearm used by Officer Potter, and that you provided that to Melissa Lauren, correct?
Correct.
Do you know whether after it was inventoried, there was further examination of that firearm?
I am aware that there was, yes.
Yep. And that additional work was done by forensic scientists, not you?
Yes.
Now, you did, though, have an opportunity to view and examine that firearm on a later occasion, correct?
Yes.
And you'd agree that you'd be able to recognize that firearm if I showed it to you?
Yes.
And
What is the question, counsel?
asking Agent McGinnis, Agent, to identify the firearm, Your Honor.
Well, that's already been done. The objection is sustained.
Yep. Can we have a sidebar, Your Honor?
I like how he stepped around the glass to talk to the judge. He's over there trying to kill Grandma. The judge is getting all pissed off. You can't really tell because of her pharmaceutical pleasures, but just getting all riled up. This is the judge riled up. What is he doing? You see him put his hands up? He's gonna do an interpretive dance. Yeah, 69 a drummer. I wish we had Judge Pickles. I mean, Judge Pornstar is alright, but Judge Pickles was killing me.
The objection is overruled.
Could you show Exhibit 178 to the witness, please? Recognize the firearm in Exhibit 178?
Yes.
Is that Officer Potter's firearm?
It appears to be, yes.
And if I showed you that same very firearm, in actuality, would you recognize it?
Yes.
Okay, I'm now showing you Exhibit 199. This also is Officer Potter's firearm?
Yes.
Now, you recall taking the firearm and the Officer Potter's taser on May 6th of 2021?
Yes.
Okay, describe the circumstances that prompted you to be in possession of both of those items.
Myself, Melissa Lauren, and one of our crime scene photographers, one of our special agents, we're going to take pictures of the items and weigh them.
And did you use a scale provided by the BCA Crime Lab?
Yes.
And when you weighed the firearm, what was included in that weight?
Ammunition.
17 rounds of live ammunition?
Correct.
And why did you weigh the firearm with ammo?
That would represent what was in the firearm the day of the incident.
And did you, you weighed both items, correct?
Correct.
Did you document the weights of those items?
Yes.
Okay, what were the results?
The firearm weighed approximately 2.11 pounds. The taser weighed approximately 0.94 pounds.
Okay. So the Glock with the ammo weighed about over twice as much as the taser.
The objection is overruled. I'll let you answer.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to discuss for a moment some other differences beyond weight between the Glock and the taser. Could you please put up simultaneously exhibits 224 and 178?
The witness looks like he thinks everybody there is an idiot, and he just really doesn't want to be there anymore.
Was identifying differences between these two weapons something that you did in the course of your investigation?
Yes.
And can you identify some of the differences for the jury at this time?
Yes.
Okay. Please.
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
Thank you.
The taser is yellow. The firearm is black. The taser has a stocky body to it compared to the Glock handgun. The grip of the taser is shorter and wider than the Glock.
Let's pause on that. How much shorter is the handle on the taser?
I don't know the exact number, but when you're holding the taser, I guess you can't get all your fingers on it.
Just demasculate the taser. It's just not big enough.
What about the texture of the grip?
The Glock handgun is textured the majority of the way around it, including the back. The Taser 7 has some light texturing on the sides, but not on the back. The Glock trigger is curved. The Taser trigger is flat with some serrations cut into it. The Taser has an external, I guess, on and off switch or safety. The Glock does not.
What does the Glock have in terms of a safety mechanism?
Technically, it has an internal safety, and then it's not really a safety, but the button on the trigger, it would need to be pushed in along with the trigger to be set off.
Okay. And so,
is he talking about pew-pews or his wife's bedroom toys?
the demonstration, the lasers and the LED lights?
Correct.
Okay. Is there any lasers or LED lights on the firearm?
There is not.
And you've already testified as to the differences between the holsters, correct?
Yes.
And the hands which are used to unholster the weapons.
Correct.
Okay.
I'll let the answer stand.
Thank you.
Do you want to move on, counsel?
Yep. I now would like to show you another object. Permission to approach the witness with Exhibit 183. Agent McGinnis, I'm showing you an item marked for identification as Exhibit 381. You recognize this?
I do.
And what is this?
A Taser 7.
Yep. And do you know the origin of this Taser 7?
I believe it belongs to the BCA.
How is it different from the Taser that we've seen today?
It's newer. That's about it. Unused.
What about with regard to the probes?
I believe there are training probes in there.
So these are not live probes that are functional?
To my knowledge, yes.
And what about the battery, based on your experience with this particular item?
It is not a live battery, or is not charged.
Okay, so besides the probes and the battery, is this item identical to Officer Potter's taser?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, the state offers Exhibit 381 as a demonstrative exhibit.
No objection for as a demonstrative exhibit only.
Okay. Yes, 381 will be a court exhibit. It will not be admitted into evidence because it's demonstrative only.
Now, Agent McGinnis, we went through some of the differences between the firearm and the taser pretty quickly. Would you agree that a person can experience some of these differences better when holding the weapons in their hands?
Yes.
The objection is overruled. I'll let the answer stand.
Okay.
These guys are
Your Honor, at
terrible.
this time, permission to publish Exhibits 381 and Exhibit 199, utilizing the services of a deputy by inviting jurors to place their hands on each exhibit here in court.
Counsel, sidebar, please.
She puts that mask on and she looks like she's going to fight the Ninja Turtles. Mike, the jury doesn't get to hold it. The jury would be trying to use those lasers against each other. Sitting there playing laser tag until somebody gets dropped. I think she's getting serious when she puts her hand on the mic so she can hold it all close up. So she sounds aggressive with a really soft voice. She's like, now when they shut these cameras off, I'm going to lay these hands on you. You understand me? You understand me? Is there something going on with her hand? She got white tattoos or something? She looks like she's got something weird going on with her pinky finger there. She's been hanging out with Trigger Crazy. That's what it is. It's not a triad tattoo, jeez. Pretty sure she's not gangbanging. Well, never mind.
The objection is sustained. I think if there was an objection, members of the jury, you're going to be able to see the taser and the handgun when you're in deliberations. It won't have a battery in it, so it won't be functional.
You won't have a live battery, correct?
Okay.
I have no further questions for this witness at this time, Your Honor. Thank you.
Hey, counsel.
Good afternoon, Agent McGinnis.
Good afternoon, sir.
This Taser 7 is a new version of the Taser. Am I right about that?
Yes.
It just came out
Yes.
in the spring of 2021,
Somewhere in that area.
or it was just purchased by Brooklyn Center in March.
That's what
This year.
I was told, yes.
In fact, the only person who had a Taser 7 was, at the time, Officer Potter in that department.
Are you asking me, sir?
I'm asking you, yeah.
I'd have to take your word for it. I'm not sure how many they had rolled out at that time.
So, the Taser 7, or the Tasers in general, have a handle that is similar to a gun, correct? There are differences, of course, but it's designed so you hold it in your hand, right?
Correct.
It's designed so that you pull a trigger like a gun, right?
They both have triggers, yes.
And it's designed so you aim at somebody, right?
Yes.
And while this Taser 7 is yellow in color, the top is black, is it not?
Yes, there is black on the top.
And the handle itself is black, right?
Yes, sir.
And you know from your investigation that this Taser was working all the way through the 10 shifts that Officer Potter had it. Is that correct?
Yes.
In fact, on that day in May, you tested the battery power of the Taser, did you not?
Yes.
You found that the battery was 78% charge, isn't that correct?
Correct.
Well enough to fire the Taser, of course.
Yes.
Right? And it was a brand new gun, right?
Taser.
Right? Yeah, a Taser. It was a brand new Taser.
Yes.
So it would be fair to assume that it would be in working order, a brand new gun. Is that correct?
Taser.
Yeah, a Taser, sorry.
Yes.
There is a confusion here between a Taser and a gun. So you would assume that a Taser that was fully charged or charged at 78% worked throughout the 10 shifts, correct?
Depending on what it started at, yes.
But you have no evidence whatsoever that this Taser wasn't operable, do you?
Correct.
And we have Officer Potter sometimes doing the test, the charge test, or whatever it's called. What's it called again?
The spark
The
test.
spark test, okay. Which he did it 6 out of 10 times, right?
Yes.
And it worked, right?
Yes.
Do you have a percentage of the officers in Brooklyn Center who skipped that spark test?
I do not.
You also tried to find, or did find, an answer to the question of whether she had deployed her Taser since she was assigned that Taser. Did you not?
Yes.
And you found out that she had not deployed it whatsoever. Is that correct?
Yes.
So the last spark test was on the 9th rather than the 11th. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
You have no evidence between those 2 days that somehow, some way, that Taser was no longer functioning. Is that correct?
No, sir.
And you also took Officer Potter in for a blood sample. Is that right?
Yes.
And she willingly went to I believe it was North Memorial. Is that right?
Yes, she did consent to the blood draw.
She consented to the blood sample, right?
Yes, sir.
And you know the results of that sample.
Yes, sir.
There was nothing in her blood.
Correct.
No alcohol, no marijuana, nothing.
No, sir.
All the screens were taken. Is that correct?
To my knowledge, yes.
May I pause for a second?
Yes.
Surprised they're not taking a 20-minute break.
During your investigation, did you ever inquire of the Taser manufacturer why the Taser couldn't be shaped in a different fashion to avoid any confusion? Did you ever do that?
Objections go overruled.
The objection is overruled. You may answer if you know.
Could you repeat that
Did
question,
you ever
sir?
inquire of the Taser manufacturer why it has built a unit like this when they could easily have shaped it differently?
I did not, and I do not know why.
Thank you.
You may go ahead and redirect.
Agent McGinnis, you've testified about the Brooklyn Center function test policy. Does that policy permit an officer to not put their hands on that Taser if they think it's working?
Wait a second. Beyond the scope, Virginia.
Excuse me. I don't understand the question. Do you want to rephrase that?
Sure. The Brooklyn Center function test policy requires that an officer test it every day, correct?
Before each shift, yes.
Was there any exception in that policy?
No.
I think I had previously stated that it lacked foundation. I don't know if you've established with this witness that he's aware of Brooklyn Center policy.
Respect. Agent McGinnis, over the course of your investigation, did you review the Brooklyn Center conductive energy device policy?
What's up, TJ? Good Lord, these people are constantly sidebars and breaks. They should come out with a rap album. Sidebars and breaks. Nah, Salty Ragu, I'm not hitting no freestyles right now. I'm sitting here starving to death. You ever be so hungry you just be sick to your stomach and then run alive? It's a good time, let me tell you. The judge kills me taking her mask off, like on these sidebars, but then wearing it while there's not a sidebar. Like, I don't know. I guess the plague just knows like when there's a sidebar or not a sidebar. It's inactive during sidebars. Zuko says, lo-fi beats you can study or be sentenced to prison to. Yeah, that's the theme, basically.
Overruled. Counsel, do you want to re-ask that question?
Agent McGinnis, we were just discussing Brooklyn Center, the taser policy, correct? Specifically the function test policy.
Correct.
And you testified on direct examination that it was required prior to every shift, correct?
Correct.
By the officer. The officer has to put it in their hands and conduct the function test.
It doesn't say that, but yes.
Okay. The policy does say, it's, quote, members carrying the taser device should perform a spark test on the unit prior to every shift.
Correct.
There is no exception.
No.
Thank you. Agent McGinnis, are you familiar with the model prior to the Taser 7, the Taser X26P?
I believe there's one in between there.
What model is that?
Or it's at the same time, the X26P, then the X2.
X2? Are you familiar with the basic layout of those particular versions of tasers?
Yes.
Do those have a similar external safety switch as what we saw in the X7?
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
Yes.
No further questions. Thank you.
Are you familiar with the custom and practices of individual officers within the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
I am not.
Anything further?
No, thank you.
Okay, you may step down.
Thank you.
All right, members of the jury. Oh, wait. You can go ahead.
You want to leave that taser?
No. I'm going to excuse the jury first. Could you sit down? I'm sorry. All right. Members of the jury, we're going to take our afternoon break, 20 minutes. Okay, please be seated. Yes, you may step down. And I think Mr. Larson. Okay, counsel. Let's take a break.
I bet the witness is so happy to get down off the stand. His body language is like, you guys don't even know what you're doing. Didn't even want to play anymore. You just want to go home. Sky Queen, why does she whisper like Walter? It's because she's under the influence of pharmaceuticals, I swear. Bipolar Bear. They're taking a break from sidebars and objections. You guys are crazy. Half of what you're saying I can't even say out loud. Sherry, you just heard that Kyle's been banned forever from an electronic game site? That's stupid. That's stupid. I'm still waiting on Linktree to write me back to tell me how I inappropriately had links on a list. I don't understand that. I'm going to end up mass emailing them if they don't write me back. I'm about tired of people not writing me back after they banned me. If you're going to ban me, at least tell me why. Trash bag so I can tell all the hooligans. What's up, farm girl? Everyone wants me to do a poll on what the judge is wearing under her robes. The thing is all the good suggestions I probably shouldn't put as multiple choice. One of these days we're going to figure out where that limitation is as far as the poll goes. Because I don't think there's any rules on it yet, but we've gotten close a couple times. Sure, crazy ain't my girlfriend. That's your girlfriend. I don't know why you're telling me that. Okay, you need to go check on your girl Corinne. She's been live like 2-3 times a day for the last 2 weeks doing nothing, wandering around Washington D.C. like she's lost. Yeah, Chase, Linktree. My Linktree link is dead in the water. Which I didn't know that. Someone went live earlier today. I shared that out. Just a dead link to everybody. Like, hey, come join the live, but don't use the link I'm giving you because it doesn't work. Good Lord, bipolar bear. I've never heard it been described that way. That's something. That is something. Fine girl, the break is 20 minutes. I didn't even look when they walked away. They'll be back soon. I promise. What do you guys think the judge does in her free time? We'll do a live poll. Write your ideas in the chat. What does the judge do in her free time? Hydrodynamics says you. That caught me off guard. You win. Touche. Plays Mario Brothers. You guys are killing me. She just sits there in a thong and a hooligan t-shirt, live streaming, playing video games, sitting there playing GTA. That's probably what she does. On Molly Ranchers. Goes to the DMV to confuse everyone. Practices throwing stars. That's funny. Attends Joe Biden rallies. What rally? I ain't never seen a Joe Biden rally. Come on, man. It's been nice not having to look at old man Walter, even though this trial's been boring. She's a driving instructor. That's hilarious. KGB sells pot. She sells dank on the weekends. So she has people to arraign and bring to trial during the week. It's job security. She runs EDM festivals. That's what she does on the weekends. She watches the live. Nah, I don't know about that. She'd be a little bit more active. She'd probably be falling asleep. She probably can't sit and watch TV. She'd be just passing out. She's way too mellow. She sells weed at her car wash, like Snoop Dogg. Teaches pole dancing. Enforces the mask mandate. That's probably the most accurate one. You guys are killing me. Does voiceovers for audiobooks. Well, I think we're going to start another poll. Did a poll on what will happen after the trial. 42% believes nothing. 32% believes riots. 14% believes looting. 12% believe protesting. The judge collaborates on OnlyFans content with Judge Pickles. I've decided that's what she does in her free time. Works in the Wuhan markets. Yeah. There's not usually riots going on while it's cold. Not usually. There could be. It's not very common. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no? Okay, let's get it. Make yourself now you're just gonna dox yourself like that. You voted yes to put pineapple on pizza. I've had all kinds of pizza. I did 3 years at pizza and 3 years at Hungry Howie's. It's funny because the way I say it sounds like I did hard time or something. I've had every kind of pizza-like substance you can have. All kinds of combinations. I know all the cheat codes and everything. Except for anchovies. I ain't never ate anchovies. That's what we should have did the poll on. If you can eat anchovies, you can take a bullet straight to the chest and survive it. I'm just convinced you're made of bulletproof armor if you can do that, because when I worked at those pizza places, I couldn't even put anchovies on the pizza. It was like kryptonite. I'd be like walking up to get the can out of the walk-in. I'm like gagging and throwing up in my mouth and having to swallow it and stuff. Yeah, and then I go make your pizza. Pineapple and spaghetti sauce. I've never heard of that. I can imagine that'd be all right. I haven't had spaghetti since I was like 23. I mean, it's been like 9 years since I had spaghetti. I don't want no dry spaghetti and I can't have the sauce. Mess up and die. What is pickled pineapple? I've never heard of that either. Ava, you like pineapple on pizza? Gross. Gross. Anchovies, the fish choker's delight. That's the fish choker special. Yep, anchovies and bacon. Pickled watermelon rind. I've never heard of that. Like, I know I don't touch grass that often, but I've never even heard of this kind of stuff. Bum Bro Pizza. I bet we'd get a lot of customers if we started a franchise like that. Chris, I'm not sure what your comment is referring to, but it's hilarious. Sound of crying or vomiting. Is that a poll suggestion? Just a statement. Just showed up and was like, you know what? The sound of crying or vomiting. It's deep. It's deep stuff. Nobody ever writes anything on Rumble anymore. I just go live there just because. Shout out to all three of you watching on Rumble. Appreciate you guys. Watermelon rind is actually good for you. I've never heard of that. Are we still running or what? Because apparently I was just disconnected for a few seconds there. What's up, Sage Pup? What's up, Dallas? The trial is kind of boring. We're just waiting to see what they decide about the officer. What's up, Tony? Now my mic is quiet? Oh, my mic is quiet. What the heck? I don't want to adjust it because then I'll be super loud. I guess I'll turn it up. I'll have to remember to turn it down though. Otherwise I'll be super loud. How do I make this work? Alright, am I louder? I am not louder. What the hell? Oh, software is so stupid, I swear. Well, kind of in a situation here. I can either end the live, or we can just deal with me being extra quiet for no reason. Whenever like the live dropped out and then it came back, and when it came back, now my mic is quiet. If I turn everything up on the next live, I'll be blowing your eardrums out. Good Lord, Bipolar Bear, I can't believe that made it through the YouTube messaging flagging system. It says it's, I don't know, on my end, I still look really quiet on the meter. I don't know, the software's stupid. I'm so tired of paying to have crappy software, but everything's kind of crappy in its own way. I'm waiting for something new to come out. Well, we'll see. Because on the meter, I'm considerably quieter than I'm supposed to be. And I think it sounds fine right now because my music is actually really quiet. But when they come back in and you hear how loud everyone else is in comparison to my voice, I think that's when you'll notice it. Because I'm almost half the volume I normally am. It almost seems like it's getting quieter as time goes on. So glad that I pay $30 a month for this. Stupid software. Drives me crazy. Hydrodynamic. Stop stuttering. If I stutter, it's because I'm censoring myself, really. You should hear me play the game. It's terrible. The things I say is actually terrible. Starting to think that they've exceeded their 20 minutes. Oh, here we go. Look at that, right on time.
Okay, thank you, Deputy.
I can't believe no one said or suggested that the judge does ASMR in her time off. I'm really surprised at that. Yeah, Jeanette, I feel the same way. They're really dragging this case out. Amy, you like pizza with onions and black olives? My friend eats pizza like that.
Please be seated.
He likes black olives on everything.
The state may call its next witness.
This time the state calls Eric Koeppen.
Okay. Good afternoon. Please stand and back of the witness chair. Raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully testify?
I do.
Please have a seat. Remove your mask. And then state your full name and spell it.
My name is Eric Koeppen, and last name is spelled Koeppen.
Okay, a couple of things to keep in mind when you're testifying. Yes or no answers because of the court reporter. No or nodding your head.
Sounds good. Thank you.
If there's an objection, stop talking immediately and don't answer unless I tell you to. If you don't understand a question, let the lawyer know. And two people can't be talking at the same time. So wait until the question's finished before you answer.
Okay.
All right. Counsel?
Mr. Koeppen, could you state your occupation for the record?
I work as a forensic scientist in the biology section of the BCA laboratory.
How long have you been employed in the biology section of the BCA?
I've been employed there since February 2017.
About 4.5 years then?
That is correct.
And what are your current duties in the biology section?
As a forensic scientist, we examine items of evidence, process that item of evidence for any sort of biological fluid, do examinations, take notes on that item, make any collections. We'll then process that item for DNA profiling, make any comparisons to known samples provided in that case, write up a report, do reviews on other scientists' work, and then testify in court as needed.
What is your educational background to do such things?
In 2013, I graduated from Hamlin University with a Bachelor's of Science in Biology. I also graduated with a Forensic Science Certificate from Hamlin in 2013 as well.
Have you received any specialized training since your employment at the BCA?
Yes. Upon my employment at the BCA, we are placed into a training program. This takes about a year. You are expected to observe other scientists in the laboratory, attend classroom lectures, perform written and oral examinations, and then complete a competency test at the end of our training.
And are you evaluated after that competency test? Are you evaluated regularly to verify your proficiency in conducting your work?
Yes, we take what are called proficiency tests. Those are twice a year. They're used to kind of examine our workflow and make sure that we get the correct results of the test.
And you've testified as an expert before, correct?
That is correct.
All right. Now, before we talk about the DNA testing you performed in this case, would you please explain to the jury quickly what DNA is?
So DNA is a chemical or a molecule that's found within the cells. It kind of is the makeup of who we are as a person. Gives you your hair color, your eye color, things of that nature. It's highly unique to certain individuals besides twins.
Is it possible to identify, besides twins, the DNA of a particular person?
Yes, it is.
When you identify the DNA of a particular person, do you have a name for that result?
We would call that a match.
A match. Oh, I'm sorry, but just the actual, what's it called, DNA profile? Is that of an individual? Is that what that's called?
At the end of our testing, we do obtain, yes, a DNA profile.
Profile of a specific individual, for example.
Of an individual, or generally after the end of our testing, it's an unknown profile until we make our comparisons.
Okay. Now, is it possible then to distinguish the DNA profile of one person from the DNA profile of another person?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, is it possible to compare the DNA of a known donor with the DNA found in an unknown sample containing DNA to determine whether that person's DNA matches the DNA profile found in the sample?
Yes, sir.
Is that sort of the middle of the road, what you do on a daily basis, sir?
Yes, I could agree with that.
What is a single source DNA profile?
So a single source profile is one that we determine to be coming from a single individual. We determine this since you get half of your DNA from your mother and half of your DNA from your father. At most, at the locations that we're testing, we would expect 2 types. If there are more than 2 types at a location, then we can call that a mixture of DNA.
So when you do have 2 single source DNA profiles, given the unique nature of them, are you able to determine if those 2 profiles are a match or not a match?
Yes.
Okay. What other types of DNA results do you expect to find besides a single source result?
Like I stated earlier, we do end up getting mixtures of DNA where there's multiple contributors to that sample. There are often times where we get samples that we're unable to make any sort of identification to.
Is testing a sample of blood recovered from a scene something you do on a regular basis?
Yes, it is.
Are you typically able to recover DNA from swabbing the blood sample?
Yes.
And when you test blood samples, are they typically single source profiles?
Yes.
But they could be mixtures.
That is correct.
All right. And you'll be able to determine that whether it's a single source or a mixture based on the DNA profile you receive, correct?
Correct. During our interpretation is when we'd be making that determination if it's a single source or a mixture.
Okay, I just want to move now on to the testing that you perform at the BCA. Based on your training and experience, do you have an opinion as to whether or not the DNA testing methods used at the BCA are generally accepted in the scientific community?
Yes, they are.
Does the BCA have a particular protocol or methodology that is used when performing DNA testing?
Yes.
Okay. And can you explain briefly the DNA testing policy?
Yes.
Or process, I should say.
Process, sure. DNA profiling is done generally into 4 steps. The first step is extraction. We'll get a sample subjected to certain chemicals to help break up the cellular material and release that DNA into a solution. We'll then purify that solution to get that extract of DNA, so that purified DNA. This will bring us to our next step, which is quantitation. We'll see how much DNA is present within that extract and see if it's suitable to move forward in the profiling process. If it does meet a certain threshold, it moves forward to the next step, which is called amplification. We'll be targeting certain areas of that DNA for identification purposes, and we'll be focusing on those areas, making millions upon millions of copies of that area or those areas. And then once that is completed, the final step is interpretation, where that basically that sample is injected into our instrumentation. A profile is then generated. We'll then basically visualize that profile and make our interpretations.
Okay. Now I have a couple of questions about items which are collected and inventoried at the BCA. When an item is collected, are they typically given both a BCA lab item number and a description of what the item actually is?
Yes. When items are submitted, they're given a BCA lab item number, as well as a description that's provided by the agency.
So if you take an item out of the vault, you're going to have an opportunity to see both the item's lab number and then that description of the item.
Generally, the description is not written on the item itself. However, it is in our laboratory information management system, so I'll be able to see that on the computer, yes.
Okay. And those numbers and descriptions typically would be provided by the scientist or agent who collected or inventoried those items, correct?
That is correct.
All right. And those numbers and descriptions, do you utilize those when you issue a report about your findings?
Yes.
Okay. And that's done obviously to aid anyone reading it?
That is correct.
All right. Now I want to move on to the testing you did in this case. Did you generate a report document in the testing that you performed?
Yes, I did.
Were certain items of evidence in connection with this investigation inventoried at the lab?
Yes.
Did that include a blood stain or sample from a known individual named Dante Wright?
Yes.
And that blood stain was identified as BCA item 30?
That is correct.
Were there also a series of swabs taken from blood droplets located in this case?
Yes, sir.
And of the items, would you agree that based on the item number and the description provided to you, they are the following? Item 22, that's blood from the vehicle's driver's seat. Item 25, blood from the vehicle's front passenger dashboard. Item 26, blood from a vehicle's passenger side headliner. And then item 27, blood from the vehicle's rear driver's seat.
Yes.
All right. So you obtained those swabs to conduct testing on them.
That is correct.
And did the known swab of Dante Wright give you a full DNA profile?
Yes, it did.
And were you able to obtain separate DNA profiles from those 4 swabs of blood?
Yes.
Okay. And of those 4 DNA profiles, am I correct that each one was a single source DNA profile?
Yes, you are correct.
All right. Did you compare the DNA profile from each blood sample to the DNA profile of Dante Wright?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And are you prepared here to report the result for each?
Yes.
All right. Let's start with the first one. Item 22, blood from the driver's seat. What was the result of your testing?
So blood from the driver's seat, item 22, was a single source male DNA profile. That male profile matched Mr. Wright's. and that profile would not be expected to occur more than once among unrelated individuals in the world population.
Okay. Next, item 25, that's the blood from the vehicle's front passenger dashboard. What was your result there?
So from the front vehicle dashboard to passenger side, it was a single source profile. It was an unidentified female profile. It did not match Mr. Wright's, and there were no further comparisons on that profile.
Were you provided any DNA samples from any other known individuals?
No, I was not.
So you had no DNA profile from an individual named Delana Albrecht Payton?
No, I was not.
Okay. Item 26, blood found on the front, the passenger side headliner.
Item 26 was also a single source male DNA profile. That single source profile matched Mr. Wright's, and once again, that profile is not expected to occur more than once among unrelated individuals in the world population.
And then item 27, blood from a vehicle's rear driver's seat.
Item 27 was a single source male DNA profile, matched Mr. Wright's, would not be expected to occur more than once among unrelated individuals in the world population.
Okay. I'm now going to show you a series of photographs already admitted as evidence in this case. Could you please show Exhibit 191? I'm showing you Exhibit 191. Do you see a sticker on there which states 22?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Could you go to the next Exhibit 192? And you'd agree that there's a sticker on the front seat there that says 22?
Yes.
All right. And based on your training and experience, to what would you conclude that this 22 corresponds?
This number 22 corresponds to item 22, which I previously reported.
Okay. And that report was that it was a match of Dante Wright's DNA profile?
That is correct.
Okay. Next, please show Exhibit 193. And then move on to Exhibit 194. Would you agree that Exhibit 194 shows an item 25?
Yes, sir.
Based on your training and experience, would you assume that this corresponds to the item number 25 that you tested?
Yes.
And this was the DNA profile that was a match for an unidentified female?
It was an unidentified female profile.
Okay. Next, Exhibit 195. And then, can you see the item 26 on the roof of that vehicle, sir?
Yes, I can.
Okay, and then go to Exhibit 196. And based on your training experience, do you believe that this was the lab item number you tested that was number 26?
Yes.
And am I right that the result of your testing showed that blood was also a match for Dante Wright's DNA profile?
That is correct.
Okay. And then finally, please show Exhibit 197. And then move to 198. I'm showing you an item, if you could zoom in on that, Mr. Miller. I'm showing you Exhibit 198. Would you agree, if we close up there, that it shows item number 27?
Yes.
And based on your training experience, are you to believe that that is a match for the, that is the blood sample that you tested as lab item number 27?
Yes.
And that, too, was a match for Dante Wright's DNA profile? Correct?
That is correct.
All right. You can take that down. So to summarize your findings, of those 4 blood items, 3 of them were a match for Dante Wright, and that 4th one on the passenger dashboard was from an unknown female DNA profile. Right?
That is correct.
Okay. No further questions.
You may step down. The state may call its next witness.
This time the state calls Travis Melland.
Good afternoon. Please step forward. Stand behind the witness chair. And raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully testify in connection with this trial?
I do.
Please have a seat. Remove your mats, please, and then state your full name and spell it.
Travis Melland, Melland.
All right. There's a court reporter taking down everything that is being said in the courtroom. Yes or no, and start shaking your head, right? No, or wait until the question's finished before you answer, so two people are not speaking at the same time. If an objection is made, stop talking. Don't answer it unless I tell you to, okay? And if you don't understand a question, of course, let the lawyer know, all right? Counsel?
Mr. Melland, could you please state your occupation for the record?
I'm a forensic scientist for the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension.
How long have you worked for the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension Crime Lab?
For approximately 6 years now.
Could you discuss your current duties with the Crime Lab?
Sure, my current duties are to compare ammunition components found at a scene to each other or to a firearm if it was recovered.
And how many years have you been doing that sort of work in the firearms lab?
I've been with the firearms lab for about 5 years now.
Okay. Could you discuss your education and training to conduct such comparative analysis?
Yes, first I earned my Bachelor of Science in Forensic Biochemistry back in 2014. Once hired at the BCA in the Firearms Laboratory, we go through a year-long extensive training module in which we learn about the different makes and models of firearms, their history, how they operate, and then also with ammunition components and how they interact with those different firearms. And then we compare, we go through and hundreds of different ammunition components and gain that cognitive ability, what constitutes an identification versus an elimination from a firearm.
Okay. And as part of the BCA's yearly evaluation process, are you evaluated regularly every year to verify your proficiency in this sort of work?
Yes, we go through annual proficiency tests in the firearms lab.
And have you testified in court as an expert before?
Yes, I have.
Okay. I'd like to talk generally about the background underlying firearms examinations. When an individual loads a semi-automatic firearm with ammunition, do you have a name for that type of ammunition, for a live round of ammunition?
Oh, yeah, a live round would be considered a cartridge.
Okay. What are the components? What are the component parts of a cartridge?
So a cartridge is comprised of a projectile, commonly a bullet, with a propellant or the gunpowder inside, an ignition source, which would be the primer end of the cartridge, all housed within a metal casing.
Okay. And the casing being the fourth, right?
Casing is the fourth part, correct.
All right. Now, when the gun fires, what happens to the component parts of the cartridge?
So when a semi-automatic firearm is discharged, the primer portion, which contains the ignition source of the cartridge, is struck by the firing pin. It creates an impression on that cartridge case, and then creates an exponential amount of gas and pressure. This allows the bullet to then travel down the barrel and out the muzzle of the firearm, picking up rifling characteristics from that firearm, as well as pressing against the breech face or the rear end of the firearm as well, before it is then ejected from the firearm.
Okay. When you conduct a firearms comparison, what items or components are you typically examining and comparing as part of your work?
Typically, we are looking at cartridge cases and bullets.
Okay. How does the examination of discharged cartridge casings and fired bullets enable you to draw conclusions about the use of specific firearms?
So when a firearm is discharged and those components interact with that firearm, it picks up markings from that firearm that we can use and look at under a comparative microscope to make an identification or elimination or some conclusion.
Okay. Can you explain to the jury what class characteristics and individual characteristics are?
Yes. So class characteristics are those that are predetermined by the manufacturer. For example, these include the caliber or the size of ammunition that the firearm takes, the size of the rifling or the grooves cut inside the barrel, the directionality of the rifling of the barrel, along with the firing pin shape, the shape of the aperture in which the firing pin goes through on the firearm, and as well as the finishing of the breech face that the cartridge case will press up against as well. If any one of these class characteristics differ, we can eliminate those components from being fired from that particular firearm. Individual characteristics are incidental to the manufacturing process and are more of the microscopic detail that are created through the manufacturing process, but also through the use, abuse, wear, and tear of the firearm itself.
Okay. And in terms of individual characteristics then, does comparing these enable you to draw conclusions about when a specific firearm was used?
Correct. We use individual characteristics for our conclusions.
Okay. I want to zero in just on discharge cartridge casings. I think you've talked about where specific markings are left on these cartridges when they're fired and ejected. Because of those marks left on the discharge cartridge casings, that's how you can compare and identify when they're ejected from a particular firearm?
That's correct.
Okay. And you can compare two discharge cartridge casings which are fired from different guns?
Yes, we could.
Okay. And that's using your sort of comparison microscope?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, let's say you only recover a single discharge cartridge casing and a single firearm. Are you able to somehow evaluate whether the discharge cartridge casing was fired from the gun?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Could you explain to the jury how that's done?
So we evaluate the firearm for those class characteristics. If all the class characteristics are in line with what we're seeing on our evidence cartridge case, then we can move on to test firing that firearm. And then we collect cartridge cases that we know of came from that firearm, as well as bullets during this process. Then we can physically compare the cartridge case known from the firearm to the evidence cartridge case collected at the scene.
Okay, so you do eventually do sort of an apples and apples comparison against discharge cartridge casings. It's just that you know the test fired one came from a particular firearm. Is that all right?
That is correct.
All right. Now, when you conduct your work on a given case, does your work go through a verification process?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And that requires another forensic scientist to examine your work and to evaluate your conclusions?
Correct. Another examiner trained and also signed off in the same discipline will verify our conclusions.
Okay. So that's discharge cartridge casings. Now let's talk about fired bullets. If you only have a fired bullet and a particular firearm, do you have to go through a comparable test firing and recover a test fired bullet to conduct a comparison?
Yes, similar to cartridge cases, we'll evaluate for class characteristics, and then if those are in alignment, then we go through and test fire, and we'll compare those known bullets from the firearm to the bullets if they were collected at the scene.
Sure. And this question might be just 1 + 1 is 2, but if you have a single bullet, single firearm, and a single discharge cartridge casing, you can compare all three items together, correct?
We only compare to a firearm. There's no way for us to compare a particular bullet from coming from a particular cartridge case.
You need the firearm for the test-fired bullet and the DCC, right?
That is correct.
Okay, I want to move on to the testing you did in this case. Did you receive a request to examine evidence?
Yes, it was.
And was that request made by Agent Mike Phil?
Yes, it was.
All right. With regard to the work performed here, were you asked to retrieve certain items of evidence which had been collected and inventoried at the BCA?
Yes.
Okay. Of the items, am I correct that you obtained 3 items?
That is correct.
All right. And when you obtained those items, they were assigned a lab number?
That is correct.
All right. And you generated a report based on your work in this case, correct?
And that is correct.
All right. And those 3 items that you got were item 7, that was a single 9mm discharge cartridge casing that was collected by Melissa Lauren. Item 13, which is a Glock 7 9mm firearm, which was item number 13. And then item 31, a projectile or fired bullet, item 31. Is that correct?
That does sound correct.
Okay. So the purposes of your testimony today, we can agree that you got a single discharge cartridge case and a single bullet and then the firearm.
That's correct.
And you were asked to compare them.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, before we talk about your results, I just want to make sure that we're talking about the same items. Permission to approach the witness, Your Honor. Mr. Melland, I'm showing you exhibits 199 202 and 200. I'll show them to you each. I'm showing you Exhibit 200. Would you agree that is the discharge cartridge casing?
Yes, it is.
Exhibit 202. What? Pardon me. Item 201. You recognize this as the fired bullet?
Yes, I do.
Thank you so much, Faustina, for your donation and
And
your
Exhibit
support. I
199.
really appreciate you. Thank you for being here.
Crammel item number 13. You recognize this as the firearm?
Yes, I do.
Were you able to compare the discharge cartridge casing to the firearm?
Yes, I was.
Did you follow the same method and procedure that you discussed a few minutes ago?
Yes, I did.
And what was your result?
I concluded that the fired cartridge case and the bullet covering the scene were fired by the firearm in this case.
I'm sorry, you might have went beyond my question. I just asked about the discharge cartridge casing. Did you also make a similar conclusion about the fired bullet?
My apologies. Yes, I did.
Okay, so in the end, your findings are that that firearm fired the DCC and fired the fired bullet in this case.
That's correct.
All right. Now, I have a couple additional questions about the firearm. Did you conduct an examination of the firearm as to its functionality?
Yes, I did.
All right. And did you confirm that it was functional?
Yes, I did.
As part of your examination, were you able to examine an aspect of the firearm called trigger pull?
Yes, I was.
What is trigger pull?
In short, the trigger pull is the force necessary to pull the trigger or fire the gun.
All right. There's a phrase some laymen use, dropping the hammer. Have you heard of this phrase?
Yeah, more commonly with revolvers. But
Okay.
yes.
Well, that's what we're talking about. How much weight does it take to fire the gun?
That's correct.
Can you tell? Can you measure how that is? How much weight that takes?
Yes, we can.
Could you describe for the jury how that's done?
So we have a static weight apparatus in which we can hang known weights and poundages and hang that off of the trigger of a firearm. We measure to a point of which we can lift up on the firearm and not have the trigger get depressed consistently, and then also keep adding weight until we're consistently getting the trigger to depress, and we create a range of what that trigger pull would be.
Now, is there a typical range for force required to pull the trigger of any firearm? Typical range?
Yes, in my experience, anywhere between 3 and 9 pounds is fairly average.
Okay, so in this case, were you able to measure the trigger pull of Exhibit 199?
Yes, I was.
Right. And what were the results there?
It was approximately 5.5 to 6 pounds.
Okay, so within the normal range.
That is correct.
Okay, no further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Cross? Oh, you may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, there's no further witnesses this afternoon.
Okay. All right. Okay, members of the jury, we're going to stop early today, okay, and we'll start up at 9 o'clock. All right. I want to assure you that we're still on schedule, okay. All right. So have a great evening.
So the next witness they have must have a whole bunch of talking to do if they're going to cut it this early. It's over an hour earlier than we normally get done.
Okay, counsel, please be seated. All right. The state filed 2 motions. I'm wondering whether the defense wishes to put in a written motion or just do oral argument on them. Okay. All right. Let's start up at 9 o'clock. I'll review the state's motions tonight, and maybe we can discuss them tomorrow. Okay? Is there anything else we need to put on the record?
On the record, no, but the state does wish to be heard in chambers with regard to an issue.
Right now?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Come on back. I don't know.
Seems kind of like a sloppy ending here. Doesn't seem as formal as it usually is. I'm just kind of hanging out here. I don't know if they're going to talk or what. Nah, I think they're wrapping it up. All right. I guess we're gonna wrap it up. It's kind of a weird way to end it, but anyways, thank you guys so much for being here. Really appreciate all of you. I am not sure if there's going to be any kind of activity later on. That was all I had on the schedule. I am going to get some food because I am starving to death. But I will try and capture any action that's going on later if available. If not if I'm available, but if the action is available. Either way, we will be going live again tomorrow and following the trial until we get to the end of it, to see how all the pieces fall. Either way, I appreciate all you guys. You guys are super awesome. I really appreciate all of you being here, being as hilarious as you are. You guys are the best hooligans a hooligan king could ask for. If you haven't joined the Discord, please take a second to go join the Discord. You will always be notified for when and where we go live, no matter where we go live. There's 3,700 hooligans in there, I believe, at this time for you to converse with, talk about the trial, talk about whatever you want to talk about pretty much. And then we also have a news board with more news resources than you can read in a day in order to be updated on what's going on around the world. So please join the Discord. Appreciate you guys so much for being here. I need to go get something to eat. So if I don't see you later, have a good night, and I will see you at tomorrow's live. Until then, stand tall, shine bright, and that's a wrap.